Right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, good day. Thank you very much for being here on time, and thank you so much again for all your contributions, both your presentations and your very useful questions and participation yesterday. I do think it was useful. I found it really interesting myself. Now, if I'd been doing my job properly, I would have had today's workshop in 2 days. But you wouldn't have stayed. You'd have gone, oh no, I'm not coming back for day two. So I thought it was more useful to share experiences yesterday than to spend 2 days going through the technical process of this DMP. I did warn you yesterday I wanted your best brains today because we're going to go through the technical process step by step. But please treat it as informal. And I will be pushing you on time because we're going to just have to keep going. But please, let's just treat it informally. If there's anything you want to say, anything I haven't explained clearly enough, anything you want to ask, please just treat it as one big group. That said, I have divided you into 3 groups. So over here we have group 1, that is your flip chart. At the back, group 2, that is your flip chart. And here, group 3, that is your flip chart. You can give your groups names if you like. Maybe that would be the first exercise, if you want to call yourself something. But I'll call you 1, 2, and 3 until you tell me otherwise. But just to go through what we're going to do today. The DMP is a roadmap to success. And I'm going to use that analogy, roadmap, all the time. And what we want to get out of today, as I touched on yesterday, you can expect, I hope, to leave today with a clear understanding of the technical process and the main steps in developing a DMP. And I hope you'll leave today enthused to start on your DMP. Just in terms of resources, we're going to have some breakout sessions. I'm calling them buzzing sessions because I want to hear you all buzzing, not just one person talking. We're going to have you write things on yellow stickies on your tables. I'll explain that in a minute, so that we break up the day. Also, the day is planned as per the timetable you have. However, I keep saying this is informal. If there's something we want to spend more time on because you feel we haven't done enough or it hasn't been well enough understood, then we will. If there's something we want to move fast over because you've got it all, then we will. It's up to you to tell me if you want to move things, change things within limits. Obviously, we're not going to be here till 9 o'clock at night. I also should say that I wrote the toolkit as, you know those yellow books, computer software for dummies, or I wrote it as DMP for dummies. Okay, so forgive me, I am not treating you as dummies, but it really is just to start at the beginning, step by step. A lot of it is obvious, but I know from yesterday and from before that many of you are at different stages in the development of DMP. Some haven't started, some have gone quite a long way along the route. So if there's something that, as I say, I haven't spent enough time on or I'm spending too much on, just shout. Okay. So this is the process that we're going to follow. We're going to follow exactly the toolkit. The other thing is hopefully you all got the workbook. Just if you want to use it. You can use it, fill it in digitally if you want, or if you've printed it out. You don't have to use it at all, but just in case you feel there are things that you want to record so that when you go home, you remember them, it's there. And I'm going to follow the toolkit. The workbook follows the toolkit. This workshop will follow the toolkit. So it's all hopefully clear. But it's up to you how you want to use it. So the process we're going to follow is, where are we now? Where are you now? Where do you want to be? How do you get there? How do you know when you're successful? And then having monitored, revising and updating the DMP. So that's the process. I spend a lot of time on this because that usually takes the most time. And the rest kind of falls into place, but that takes a bit of time too. So, as I said, that's the format. I've written the toolkit in this format, which I hope makes it a bit accessible. every section there's an output. What do you want to achieve at each stage? And then I've written key questions, the big questions, and then useful questions. And you might think, well, Tom, these can't be useful, but it's just they're additional questions that might be worth asking. And then in some of the sections, we give the sources of insight. So if you want to answer these questions, where do you go to get the information? And then there's a few tips, because as we said yesterday, and Anthony said the same, there's a lot of detail here. But at the end of the day, remember, this is about action. It's not a theoretical exercise that you want to tick every box. There may be things you say, well, I'm going to ignore 60% of what's in this section because I don't need it. We'll move forward. So we should be thinking of the DMP as a relatively light touch in that you want it to be actionable. There's no point in assessing the occupancy rates and the profitability of every single tourism business if you don't do anything about it. It's useful to know, but you might decide, well, actually, if I can get a rough idea of how businesses are operating, where people are coming from, that's good enough. So the toolkit is a lot of detail. It's a lot of information that you might not want to use all of. So keep the focus on action, even though I'll be talking about this is how you do this is how you collect information, here are the sources of insight. You won't be doing all of it, I'm sure. So those are the tips, trying to keep it light. And there are a few examples, I'll give some more today, of how other people have done stuff. So the first thing is, the big question is, and I said yesterday we'd ask this, the output is, how relevant is tourism to our areas? And the big question is first, and I'm going to ask you in discussion, do you really want tourism? On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you want it? Just throw any ideas. Or do you want more? It's the question of yesterday. Are we in a position of where we haven't got enough? Or there's the issues about seasonality, about spreading the traffic, or maybe in some places we've got too much. Maybe some residents don't want it. We really need to have an idea of that before we start. Do you want tourism? For those who are saying no, please leave the room now. Yeah? You do?
Yeah, sure. It's really beneficial economically. But of course, as I mentioned in my presentation yesterday, we have, because of the growth, we have also a lot of challenges. But I feel that we are not sold out in Iceland. We still have plenty of room, plenty of space, plenty of land. But we have to spread them around and strengthen the infrastructure in the places where we are really seeking to go to.
Does everybody agree with that? Is anybody going to say, no, we actually have too much? Because I know some areas will say we've got too much or something. Right, I'm taking that as a yes. Silence means yes today. So would you all like to give me 50,000 krona? Silence, thank you very much. No, I think that it's critical that there have been lots of stories, as you know, in various media about over-tourism in Iceland. And I think that's absolutely right. That is it over-tourism, or just you have pressure points and we can spread the traffic seasonally and regionally. And an example, it's a very bad example to use for Iceland, but if you look at Singapore, which is a very small island, and I think they have about 60 million tourists, their solution to coping with tourists, apart from marketing to get more as a hub, has been to build more world-class attractions. I don't think that's what you want to do, because your nature is your biggest asset. But the point is, there are examples of how some people can manage it by building the right sort of things in the right places.
I sometimes say that we are not the ones that control how many tourists get to Iceland. It's Isavia. The people that run the airport. They decide how many flights we will have to Iceland. And obviously, but the limit is going to be availability in hotel rooms and apartments. Especially in Reykjavik. So we were sold out last summer for almost. I think we had occupancy in hotel rooms from 99 to 105%. And it's, as I told you, in February alone, we had a 95% occupancy.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I've never seen a destination perform like Iceland in that way. And usually I think hotels and airlines have different thresholds. I think when you get to about 65, 70%, general managers and airline managers get worried because the capacity is going to suddenly boom and go over. I guess the other thing to think about, which is not really part of today, but what if there's an issue with WOW, so they go bust? Or what if airports in the US start upping their landing fees and Iceland Air says, no, we're not going to. So suddenly you have a massive reduction in through traffic. And anyway, that's for another time. So I think you've answered the question. I mean, obviously we all know, but I just wanted to raise it because it's a starting point. Do you want it? And why you've said. Now, the next question is, on your table you have a bowl with two little, what I'm calling red resource balls in them. And we need an answer to this question. Has anybody got any idea what they are? Okay. Remember yesterday I said we're not to talk about resources. DMP doesn't cost anything, okay, except for time and travel, the plan. The implementation of it, if you want to undertake a survey, if you want to build a tunnel, if you want to fill the holes in the road, of course that costs. But actually planning is pretty low cost. So I really want to think and focus on the planning today, not on the problems of resources. So I give you full permission, if anybody mentions problems with resources, the word money, the word resource, to throw one of those red balls at whoever mentions money or resource, okay? So that's what they are. But just to make the point, let's keep focus on planning. So the key elements of a DMP, I'm going to go through these. You all do have your area defined now, don't you, for your DMP? Has anybody not got the area for the DMP defined? So you've done that? Yeah, good, okay. The next is we need to assess our current tourism performance and impact, the positive and negative impacts. Destination audit, that takes a lot of time. We'll spend a bit of time on that. I'm going to ask you to do an exercise on that. It's about looking at the products and visitor experiences available and what development priorities we need. What's our image and appeal? Critically, what's our visitor profile? And I keep coming back to this phrase, attracting the kind of tourists we want. I'm just going to mention four examples. If we don't, and we're all doing different things, people might say, and I've heard it before, oh, well, we're doing fine, we're doing marketing. That's our DMP. Or we're doing a bit of development. We're building a visitor attraction for kids. That's our DMP. Well, it's not, because what happens if we get the wrong tourists? I'll give you an example. Costa del Sol in Spain. So they got masses of the wrong, well, it's still good cash cow business, but it meant the image of Spain suffered. I'm sure you know that. So they then had to focus on culture. And had they planned to get a balance between cheaper beach family tourism in the Costa del Sol and higher end cultural tourism in the interior, it could have actually done much better from the start. But they rushed fishing where the fish were, lots of families looking for cheap sun holidays in the 60s and 70s, and then found they created a problem for themselves because they couldn't sell the more upmarket products in the interior. So there's one problem, lack of planning. Another, I think Anthony talked about it yesterday, in the New Forest, lots of people coming on coaches, looking at ponies, looking at trees, and spending no money. But the buses are eroding the roads, you've got pressure, other tourists saying, let's not go there because there's too many visitors. So you might be saying, yeah, well, marketing to coach tour companies, but are you getting the right spend? Are you getting the right kind of visitors? Are you turning others away? So that's another, to me, underpins the need for planning. Asia, this is about understanding your market. So I worked in Southeast Asia for 6 years, and I love hiking, as I'm sure many of you do. And I went back, I was actually stuck, thank you Iceland, I was stuck during Eyjafjallajökull eruption. I got stuck for 3 weeks in Singapore, which thank you very much. It's a new category of holiday called enforced leisure. And But it was lovely because I used to work there and I'd gone back on a piece of business and my staff looked after me wonderfully. So I had 3 weeks to survive. But they then said, Tom, everything's developed. We know you crazy Guilo. Guilo means foreign devil. You crazy foreign devils like hiking. Yeah? So we're going to take you on a hike. And it was lovely because Singapore had constructed a hike. The tarmac route went through an area of forest and jungle. And it was very nice, but their idea was, oh, Westerners like to hike, so we're going to build a path. Well, I don't want to go on a path. We want to go up mountains where there's nobody else. So it's kind of interesting that it was very nice. It was lovely of them to take me. But what I mean is, if we don't understand our markets, we might build the wrong stuff. So again, that's a bit planning. And you're seeing other issues of over-tourism in Venice and Barcelona, particularly at the moment. So I think those are areas where you can see that had there been a bit more planning earlier on, they might have been able to head off some of these problems. I'm sure they will, but that's just an argument for a DMP and understanding the markets. The next element is an assessment of the tourism impact and what skills do we need. We had a lot of some talk yesterday about attracting the right skills, but we can't do that because we don't have the housing and so on. Stakeholder mapping is another issue. Government structure and communications, how do you manage it, who does it? And then at the end, you want a vision with an action plan. And I would say you should be looking 3 years forward. Some people say 5 years, but in your situation, 5 years is like science fiction. You're going to have 10 times the number of visitors. So I think 3 years is a good time horizon. Okay. So I'd like now to start the first exercise. And with your pink stickers, which can I just, well, I know you know what the colour pink is, but it's always easy with these ones. Could you write out, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you in either embarking on your DMP if you haven't, or in continuing it if you have started? So 1 means you're not at all confident, 10 means you're supremely confident. And write it at the top, because you need space for another comment at the end of the day, because at the end of the day I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. So write on the top of the page sticky how confident you are, 1 to 10, and hang on to it, please, with your name on it. How are we doing? Right. I'm going to carry on. So if you've only got 2 out of your 3, I'll let you fill it in the next few minutes as we go. So starting off, where are we now? This is, as in the toolkit, I'm not going to go through these, but these are the steps at this stage that you would normally go through in developing a DMP. I'm not going to read them. You can see them there in the toolkit, but I will go through them. First of all, definition of the DMP area. You've all done that, so we can gloss over that. The one thing I would say, which many of you have heard me saying before, is we don't need to think in terms of specific municipality or other geographical lines on a map. I always give the example, which is in the DMP, of the Brecon Beacons National Park in Wales, where I did some work. And quite a bit outside the park, Wales's biggest tourist attraction is. It's a former coal mine called the Big Pit. And it's not part of the national park. You could argue you don't want former industrial stuff polluting the image, the brand image of a national park. But they were big enough to say, actually, visitors don't just stick within the boundaries of the park. So when we're planning, we need to be taking into account tourism experiences on the periphery and outside the park. So they had what I call a virtual boundary for their plan. They took this Big Pit into account in their planning because it was a massive number of visitors. And that's, to me, a good example of why we should not stick with municipality or geographical or whatever boundaries. So I think we just need to be a bit liberal in our thinking. But anyway, you've done all that, so I'm going to move on. These were useful questions in defining the destination. Management and communication structure. We need to start with the management. who will manage the DMP development? Well, we've already got that in place. We've got project managers in place now. Who will serve on your DMP steering group? Have you all got your steering group established?
We don't.
You don't?
No.
Right. Any issues with it? I mean,
No.
Okay, good. Because often the risk is do not make it too big. And the risk is that we try and make it fully representative of every tourism every sector of the tourism industry. Region. But okay, I think you're pretty well there. And then have we got communication structures in place with our stakeholders? I think it's important, as you heard yesterday, and I think it was Reckioness, did you, talking about, oh no, it was Österland, about how you've involved stakeholders from the start, which is really critical so that they get on board. So you need to develop a communications plan at this stage so that once you've got your structure in place for the steering group, then you know how you're going to communicate, what you're going to communicate, and when to your stakeholders, so they're involved. The rest of the stakeholders can wait, and you may disagree with some of the things I'm saying, so please say, but the most important thing is that you have a structure for managing the plan at this stage. Any comments, questions? How easy has it been to get that together?
Steering groups.
Yeah, steering group.
I think it takes a lot of time, especially with the municipalities.
Yeah.
That's kind of what keeps us back.
Yeah.
Is the time that it takes municipalities to go through.
And is the problem because they don't understand, they don't believe, or they're just busy?
They're just busy. And for example, some of the smaller municipalities only meet once a month.
Yeah.
And they want to do it in a regular meeting.
Yeah.
So if you just missed it by a week, you have to wait 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So stuff like that.
Yeah.
In the preparation period we had before we started the market analysis, we had this stakeholders involved in surveys and to try to grab views of the area. And also in the process itself, we had 7 people in the project, and so we have been for quite a long time involved with stakeholders.
So it went smoothly, but it took quite a lot of time.
Yeah, and then we had the municipalities on board also in this process. Areas covered.
Is that because you kind of know them all and you've been talking to them for a long time, or were you starting from scratch?
Yeah, we started in 2014.
So it's easier if you.
You already had the network of contacts.
So
that has been working for a while. So it was easy just to take that over.
That's really interesting, important, because given that you don't have a formal, full DMO structure around Iceland, I wondered to what extent those relationships existed, but that's great. Christian?
It was easy for us to get the group together, but it's more difficult to get the work groups together. People, they believe in the work, but they don't have the time. They don't want to. That's more tricky.
It's going to be a problem throughout the rest of the time when they're
My advice on that, because I've done many of these things when I worked for Chief Executive Visit Scotland, the last thing people want is to be a sounding board, a talking shop. So if you're talking about getting subgroups, call them something like a task group, so they really feel there's an action and that they are asked to come up with a decision and do something. An example, we did, one of our biggest problems in Scotland was seasonality. There's a surprise. We have a reasonable 3-month season and then it drops. So that was the biggest focus for some time that we were trying to so what we did is we pulled a task group of the industry together to figure out how to address this. We then gave it a name, Autumn Gold, which was like fall in New England, come and see the autumn colour. And then we had a task group saying, what should we do? And some people said, well, we need to discount. to get people here in autumn. And others said, no, we don't want to discount. So that was good. We got over that. And we ended up running a marketing campaign which ran for many years. But it was largely run by the industry. And they felt really good about that because they were involved in discussions at a strategic level. And then there was an output that they were actually involved in delivering, both in providing offers for the campaign, but also in deciding what to do, what campaign to run. So that's probably for a slightly later stage. But okay, thanks. We'll just still on this bit, useful questions, really, what do we want to communicate to whom and when? What type of information for whom? When do we need it? And how are we going to communicate? So social media is great, but don't overuse it because people get fed up with having, here we go again, another message from the DMP manager. So don't be promiscuous with social media is my advice. Email, yeah. PR campaign. I mean, we can go into detail of that if you want, but I think they're pretty straightforward. But when we look at the management communication structure, these are the sort of the critical areas: the DMP manager, the steering group, the chairperson, and other stakeholders. So we've got the strategic responsibilities here for each of these, and the operational here. And it's important, I think, to distinguish. So the DMP manager has an advisory role with regard to the steering group, but an operational role in developing and implementing the DMP, and should be providing regular reports on progress to the steering group. I would suggest those reports should be no more than quarterly, and so that hopefully is clear. The steering group, their role is really overseeing the development, overseeing the implementation, and monitoring progress of the DMP manager. So they're not doers. They're strategic, have a strategic oversight. At an operational level, yes, the DMP manager might want to get members of the steering group or the steering group involved in issues. I'm thinking particularly in sometimes you can fire a member of your steering group at a particularly difficult person. Let's say you've got a problem with a farmer. We've had that. Farmers in Scotland, and I'm sure Iceland isn't much different, can be very individualistic. And they get into tourism and then they say, well, we don't want to build we want the cheapest kind of accommodation. So they build a horrible looking structure that destroys the landscape, but it's on private land, so it doesn't need planning. I'm talking about Scotland.
One question.
Yeah.
Is the DMP board and the steering group, is it the same?
Yes, it is.
It's just, yeah.
It is. Sorry, I'm probably should.
I was thinking, am I supposed to act on?
No, I'm sorry. It's just I'm trying to cover all interpretations. I should. Let's cover the steering group. Thank you. Just to keep it clear. So obviously, farmer wants to build the cheapest accommodation because they see all these visitors coming in. Maybe you can fire somebody on the board who is perhaps. I had a chairman who was chairman of the farmers' union as well, who could go and talk to this person as a farmer to farmer and say, look, can you actually use vernacular style architecture? It maybe cost you a little bit more, but it'd be better for business. And sometimes you can use individual members of the steering group. I guess you know all that, but I just wanted to show how you can use the board, the steering group members. The chairperson of the steering group, this is, obviously has a lead role in chairing the group and in championing. This is really important, championing the DMP, because in my experience, what you get is a lot of people saying, what's this, another piece of bureaucracy, another layer. You need people to be talking it up, to champion the purpose, to talk the language of those people out of your stakeholders. And the DMP manager can't do that, or shouldn't be doing that, because DMP manager has enough to do with just running the business. So I think it's really important that the chairperson is well briefed and is able to, and hopefully will have good contacts in the local community and be respected and be able to talk informally, as well as formally if necessary at events, to push the DMP and why it's necessary. And we were talking yesterday, Anthony kept mentioning all these meetings that he has and all the nurturing of stakeholders, that's part of it. So I don't underestimate the amount that you may need to use that person to do that. And then other stakeholders, there's a whole range, we'll come on to it later, but it's really involving them according to their expertise when necessary. So you might want to bring, as you're talking about, Virginia, bring people with skills in marine skills on board for your coastal tourism activities, if you have a subgroup on that. Or if you're talking about safety, you might want to bring somebody from the emergency services onto that. So it's about being selective and just picking the right people. But I think another word that was used yesterday was courage. This is not something that we're sitting in a corner saying, I'm sorry, I'm going to be bureaucratic, I want you to be. Let's be big and be courageous, but this is important for your area. And I think we need to be very courageous and say that. Because I see a lot of people going, oh, sorry to be a bit bureaucratic, but I've got to fill in this box on my destination plan. No, this is for everyone. It's important that you feel this is a big deal. And then other people will get that message and will get involved with you. And if you've got good champions, they'll realize it. Yeah.
I'm wondering about the DMP chairperson. Did all the regions pick a chairperson in their steering?
Yep.
No, we didn't.
You didn't? Who didn't?
Westwards.
Yeah. And is that just because you haven't done it yet, or was there a problem?
We didn't actually realize that we had to do it.
Okay. Well, okay, I'm a liberal guy. If we have a flat management style, great, but I don't think it always works that well. I do think it's useful, but if you feel that locally, culturally, it's not necessary, fine, I would advise against that, but you may say still do it.
Who would you recommend for us to have as a chairperson? I mean, should it be us that are responsible for the project, or
as a chairperson?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Or should it be someone
No,
else?
sorry. The criteria for a chairperson, very simply, I think it's somebody who's a big person in the community that has hopefully some understanding of tourism and commitment to it. Because the most important thing, two most important things, are that person can persuade others in the community about the DMP, and two, they can be a good leader of the steering group. Now, I would say while the DMP manager should have really good tourism experience, the DMP chairperson doesn't need to. I think you need a charismatic person who's respected in the community. I've seen people who are in business, and Anthony mentioned yesterday about having people who may be in advertising or creative sector. So that would be my main criteria. Don't worry about tourism. So somebody who will be listened to. As I say, I had a chairman of Visit Scotland whose previous job, he had been a farmer, and he was chairman of the National Farmers Union. But he was a big guy, so he was brought in to chair the tourist board because he had the political contacts, because he had the way. He could get the Queen, and he did end up working for the Queen, eating out of his hand at the same time as a farm labourer. He had that skill, that people skill. So that, to me, that's what you need to be looking for, because this person is not going to be involved in operational activities. They're going to be managing a high-level steering group to bring everybody together, and particularly to champion process in the community. Does that give you any? Can you all see somebody now that you think, oh, they'd be good? He or she would be really good. They may not do it, but no.
That's my problem.
We actually see a number of people because we have such a big area.
Yeah.
Could it be that would be one person in
Yeah.
the West and one in Northeast? Not one person from the steering group?
It's hard, and especially as we don't have a DMO structure already, it's hard because some people are going to feel left out. Maybe you have a competition, like a job ad. That may be the fairest way to do it. And I would suggest then that you and selected people locally that might be on the steering group be the interview panel. And again, that has to be up to you. You know whether you will suffer by appointing somebody or whether you have to go through a more public process. A public process for this, to be honest, it's a voluntary position. A the public process, to me, is a bit heavy, but you may have to. Any? So, just finally on the other stakeholders, I think it's important that you, as the DMP manager, feel that you can actually co-opt them or get them onto these task groups that Christian was talking about. They're going to be essential. You're going to need task groups to look at issues within your area. So let's say you're developing, as I say, coastal tourism strategy. You might want to put a group together for that. Or if you have a real issue with safety, you might want to put a group together to address safety. And slight tangent, but when it comes to safety, I know it's one of the things I've heard most about when I've been in Iceland. My fear is you become so safe you're not exciting anymore. If you put up too many barriers, so be careful of that. But I think I can understand the issues. But I would counsel against, as I said yesterday, answering the right question with the wrong answer. And you're probably going to throw things at me, but we were talking the other night about gravel roads, right? And people wanting to tarmac those roads. Now, it's a bit like in Scotland. We had a bridge over to the Isle of Skye. Tourists didn't want it because it's romantic to have a piece of water between an island and the mainland. But if you've got an emergency and you want to get somebody to hospital in an ambulance and wait for a ferry, that's a problem. So residents wanted the bridge. So my view is things like road infrastructure should be driven by residents, not tourists. I personally, and this is where I'm going to be a bit on thin ice, I know, I would rather stick with the gravel roads from a tourist perspective, because to me, that reinforces the brand of Iceland, that you are a bit wild and, it's not all manufactured Disneyland and easy. And the analogy I keep using, for which I ask you to forgive me, is Namibia. I worked in Namibia for a while, and they have gravel roads. They have a lot of the same problems as you with people spinning off them because they're actually like yours. They're good roads. So you get a false sense of confidence. You can drive quite fast, and then people spin off on the corners. And people occasionally die of exposure because they get a bit lost. There's no road sign. They get lost, and my first week I was there, an Austrian couple strayed. They're off-road, but they couldn't find. They ran out of fuel because you kind of need to know where you can fill up your car. You need to take water with you. You should take spare fuel tanks, and they died of heat of exposure. I remember the chairman of the tourist board saying, "It's quite good for publicity, really." She said, "Well, we're a country that requires you to be a bit tough. Those are the type of people we want to attract." And she wasn't being callous, but she's saying we don't want to make it so easy that those kind of people are going to go, it's not like it used to be. So I don't want to labor it too much, but just be careful. I think safety can be important, but don't over worry about it. What do you think? I mean, gravel roads, do you really need to pave them for tourists? Or okay, here's what I mean by the wrong answer to the right question. If tourists, you're having accidents, is it the road that's the problem, or is it the way they're driving? So should we be tackling the way they're driving, or who we allow on the roads? I mean, there's lots of other answers to that question. I worry about going to an expensive solution that may actually damage the brand, may not change, because faster roads, there is plenty of evidence, make the road better, people drive faster. So you may have other accidents. I don't think I should go too far into this, but it's something that came up the other day.
Of course, certain areas where you feel that should be
Yes.
guided tours and be in controlled environments.
Yeah.
So, in some sense, I mean, part of the right?
Yeah.
To know how we're going to navigate the traffic.
Yes.
And what control do you actually have to do?
Yeah, and we heard yesterday, we heard from Katla Geopark and from Snæfellsnes that they're trying to kind of zone and push people into places that they're welcome and keep the other places quiet. I think that's up to you to decide how you manage that, but it does need to be managed. Oops. Yes, yes. Move on. I'm sorry.
What about the groups? The
Which,
the work groups themselves,
Hmm.
the task groups, they're
Yeah.
not in this.
yeah, these ones.
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean, they're of course focused on the task itself
Yes.
and getting the knowledge that you need for the completion of the task.
yeah.
But do you have some insights on, how big, what's the functional size
Yeah.
of the task?
I think small is always beautiful. So the smaller the better, because the bigger, the more trouble you're going to have. I think it's a balance between getting enough representation, big enough for representation, but small enough for action, and always err on the smaller side. I would say 5 or 6 is enough. It depends on the issues. If you've got, take safety, if you've got mountain safety, road safety, aviation, you might want to have a bigger group because you've got so many different people, or split it into subgroups. I think that will be defined by the problem. So what is the problem? In our case, say, back to Scotland, Autumn Gold, our problem was not enough business in the off season. So we put a group of about 12 people, I think, together, which is hoteliers, visitor attractions, tour operators. And we gave them a strategic role, decide what needed to be done, as well as an action role. Different people were allocated tasks in their areas to get hotels on side, to get hotels to come up with Autumn Gold offers, to brand their marketing Autumn Gold, things like that. So I think it depends on the nature and the size of the problem. And that's the sort of cop-out I'm going to be saying all day. There is no silver bullet. But take safety. Say, for instance, if safety is a big issue, is it really largely road safety? So mountain safety might be a completely different task group. So it'll depend on that. And I do think that generally, especially when you don't have a low density community, you tend to know who are the people you need to involve. I'm not going to give you silver bullets, but I think those are the questions that you need to ask. Always start with the problem. What is it? What do we need to solve? Okay, who is going to be helpful? And that there are two others. Helpful is about the people that have the skills, but you might have somebody who's got the skills who's a really difficult character. You don't want him on board. We all know him. We all have lots of him. You notice I'm not saying her. But we have lots of these people who are really difficult. Sometimes actually they can be really good to work with, because if they come on board, it's the old story of doing it inside the tent rather than out. They can turn that aggression or that energy into positivity, but only you can decide that. So it's largely who's got the skills to address the particular task, let's say road safety, and who's got the right kind of frame of mind to contribute on that team. What you don't want is somebody who's going to be a team disruptor, unless you can turn them.
One of our sort of experiences is that there are a lot of problems in this part of the country now, which wait for later.
Yeah.
Because we have, at least in many areas, it isn't that many that we can call upon and ask to join into a group. So be making an ideas for like 12 task groups and try to fill them with people that actually do something, managing people. Just focus on fewer things and get them done, and then look what to do next. That's our experience.
I think that's right. It's about phasing it, because you will very frequently, in my experience, you'll be going back to many of the same people, because they're the people that are willing, have the energy to commit to this. And yeah, if you've got 12 things if you have 12 task groups, I would say that's far too many. Phase it. 3 this year, 3 next year, whatever. And it doesn't mean you don't deal with the other stuff. You get on and do it, and just deal with the priority. The sore thumbs. You know, you'll have a lot of sore thumbs. You jam your thumb in a door, it's sore. You might have a cut on your other finger, but you're going to mend that. You're going to deal with that sore thumb first. So the sore thumbs are the things that stick up immediately. And I do think so much of this is, when you're doing it, it becomes common sense, because it's what comes at you. It's like I say, once you get started, you get a momentum and you deal with things as they're coming, but you deal them within a planned framework. Otherwise you're all over the place. But I think it's important to try and to get other stakeholders involved, because then they will become DMP advocates as well if they feel they're contributed to it, and they will be useful. And many more brains are better than one. So we're going to move on now. Destination audit. We're going to spend a bit of time on this. If you're happy, you may say, okay, let's move on in a minute. But it's the thing that's probably going to take, certainly in the early stages, the biggest amount of time, because you're going to need to do a lot of research or a lot of fact finding. By research, I don't mean paid surveys necessarily, but you're going to need to find out a lot of facts. And it's about 2 things. Producing an inventory of the products and experiences. So what have we got? And that's looking at the visitor value chain. I'll come on to that in a minute. What have we got and how good is it? And that's, for the markets we're looking at, is it good enough? So the key questions are, what are the tourism products and experiences? I deliberately saying experiences because when we think of products, we think of physical things like hotels and visitor attractions and restaurants. But for many tourists, they're coming for an experience like quad biking in the lava fields or glacier trekking, which is, to me, an experience. And that it's what they take away with them in their head rather than the actual place they've stayed. And then how good are they? Those are the key questions. So the principles that underpin an audit, I think, are, let's look at the quantity of what we have. An inventory, and if I see you writing notes, and if you do want, I'm happy to make this available to everybody afterwards. You've got the workbook as well. As I say, how good are they? And I keep coming back to this. How distinctive are they? How East Iceland are they? How North Iceland? How Westfjord are they? What is our sense of place? Are they reflecting it? And how competitive are they? Let's just have a think about our competitors. Are they as good as our competitors? And are they future-proofed? Hard to tell, but we can figure out what the future trends are likely to be. We had a talk yesterday, for instance, about FITs, independent travellers. Are we building stuff for group tours when actually the big trend is towards independent travel? What about the threats? You know, how many people are coming here for what Iceland has to offer? And the threat is, they've done Iceland, it's somewhere else becomes fashionable. So those are the sort of principles. You know, we could go on forever, but a lot of this is a slightly personal view from me, and you may feel differently, please say. But I think those are important elements. And many of you have seen this before, but I think a good way to start the audit is to the customer journey, to see how the customer approaches the destination and look at all these things. So how are they planning? What information are they getting to come here? So this is your pre-marketing stuff, your website, your social media. That's the first step. What's the sense of arrival? How welcome do they feel? How accessible are we? You may take gravel roads into account there, saying, well, it's not accessible because 20% of people don't want to drive on gravel roads. We have to pay for them. Or you know, signage. Can they find their way here? Is there a sign at the junction of the road to tell them Westfjords is this way? Otherwise, they keep going around the ring. Sense of place. This is back to this thing. You know, how much does this feel like us? How much does this feel it reflects our brand and that we are different from every other part of Iceland? Then looking at the physical stuff, accommodation, restaurants, cafes, bars, shops. What have we got? And how good are they? Internal transport, probably less important because most people are going to be driving or on coaches, but nevertheless, worth looking at the transport infrastructure. Then the big reasons people are coming, attractions, tours, do we have enough guides? What guides do we have at the moment? What events do we have? We had an example yesterday of an event that was, I can't remember if it was Reykjavik or the New Forest, but to stimulate off season, you're putting in quite a lot of events. So what do we have at this stage? What are the issues around that? What sort of heritage and culture offered do we have? Then how is it interpreted? Do we actually provide access to information? How do people get information? What interpretive signs and information is there? Is there Wi-Fi? And then what about the landscape, the built environment? Is it well maintained? What are the attractions of that? What venues do we have? Entertainment venues, concert venues, sort of visitor facilities. And I always find it quite useful to talk about toilets and parking because they're very tangible things, but they are one of the biggest problems. From the point of view, there's never enough, or they're not open at the right time, or they're in the wrong place, or they're ugly. And we talked about it yesterday, and I was saying, in lots of places, you go to a beautiful natural site, and there are one or two places in Iceland that have seen this, and certainly I've seen it in African countries, where you've got this lovely site, but when you get there, all you see is cars. And maybe we could have thought about putting the car park somewhere else, or maybe there's no room, or maybe we put it miles away and bus people in. Toilets, we all need to use them, but do they need to be utilitarian and ugly and stuck in the end of a car park? Or with a little bit of thought and a little cost, can we actually stick them into the landscape and put a turf roof on? And some parts of Iceland you have that. So not hugely expensive, but things like that can actually make a big difference. So getting an inventory of what we've got. At this stage, we're not saying what we want to do with them, but it's just an understanding of where we are, putting it all down and then on paper and saying, but with a critical eye that's saying, yeah, well, we've got 500 toilets, but they're all in car parks. So maybe we should be thinking about that in the next stage. And the questions that we should be asking are, how easy is it to access all these things? How good are they? How efficient are they? How engaging, attractive are they? How appealing? How distinctive? And how much are they us? That's the sense of place thing. So there could be many other things, but to me, those are the sort of main things to look at. We'll look at this again later when we come to where do you want to be. But that, I think, it's the customer touch points. You know, the areas where customers or visitors come into the touch with the destination, and we need to make sure that they're really positive experiences. And actually, you've all heard this, but you know, the difference between a destination and a product, like Coca-Cola, is Coca-Cola is always the same, and you know what you're getting. But I can have an experience today, and my friend can have an experience with me in Iceland, and he can get a rude customer service person, and I can get a friendly one. My impression of Iceland is suddenly very different from his. So we really have to be thinking about these all the time. And as I say, very critically, it's hard for a destination manager or a project manager sometimes to address these because you have to be honest. It's a bit like Alcoholics Anonymous. You need to know what, admit to yourself that things aren't as good as they could be before you can improve them. And that's hard when you have to go back to your members or to your stakeholders and say, actually, we think that you're putting too many people on your bus into Geysir, or we don't think there's enough control of the environment, or we think that the toilets are ugly. It's hard because we all live in the same place. So that comes back to the word courage. You do need to have the courage to address that. Signage, just one of the things, I did bang on about signage a bit, but just to give you an example of some of the signage, how it can be designed, nicely designed rather than just utilitarian. So here's some signage for hiking trails in the south of England, nicely designed wooden signs. They do the job. You go this way for this South Downs way, go this way for whatever, but they're nicely designed, piece of wood. In York, Heritage City, they've got wrought iron signs. Okay, a bit more expensive, but they've invested in that. This place in Buckinghamshire, Bedfordshire in England, Olney, on their town sign, they've not only told you they've got this big church spire there, but they tell you a bit about their place, the sense of place. They have this pancake race that has been going on since 1445. And in recent years, they have a race between the people of Olney, don't ask me how it works, of Olney and a place in Kansas called Liberal, Kansas. And they have this pancake race. So it's become a tradition in the town. So rather than just say you're entering Olney, they actually show you a little bit of what they're about. And that's what I mean about reflecting your sense of place. You can very simply reflect a character of a place in a sign. It doesn't have to be just utilitarian. New Zealand is an interpretation board, lots of good information, but you can see nicely designed, I think, in local wood. Wood might be a problem in Iceland because of weathering, but you can still make it attractive rather than just functional. And I've seen some good examples of that in Iceland, I have to say. Exactly. I think your signage in Reykjavik is very, to me, reflects a cool, modern brand, but it's very informative, very, very nice. And you can be humorous as well. This is actually a town in Scotland. I took this photograph. They're actually called Dull. So the people there said, well, let's twin with boring in Oregon. And there's another city called something like really unexcited. I don't know. They're twinned with. But a bit of fun. Another bit of fun. Cornwall, this is actually a spoof. It's not a real sign, but you can be humorous. When it's hot, please dress for the body you have, not the body you want. You don't have, but I'm just trying to give you an example, bit of fun. Example of how you can be a bit creative with your sign, music. And then public realm, the way you dress the place up, the symbols that you use. This is a figure in glass of Dromaeus, the runner, the sort of ancient Greek runner in Athens, symbolizing ancient Greece, marathon. So you're getting a sense of place in some of the public design. Stockholm, the home of the Nobel Peace Prize, the gun that's tied in a knot. I always think there's a huge irony, given that they have Bofors, one of the biggest arms manufacturers in the world in Sweden, but nevertheless, it's a powerful message in public art. I'm happy to say I was partly responsible for this. Not the picture, but we were doing some work, a placemaking strategy for Bristol in England. And they have you heard of Banksy, the sort of guerrilla street artist? Banksy comes from Bristol. There's lots of really cool, fun street art in Bristol. And they have this an area in the city centre, lots of old 60s buildings, really ugly. And one of the things we came up with, and as a strategy for their brand identity, we said, you should position yourself like Berlin is the European capital of street art. Bristol should be the British capital of street art. And we thought the city council, who tried to paint out lots of Banksy stuff because they thought it was a mess, suddenly turned around and said, hey, that's a good idea. We said, you should go for parkour, the parkour chant where you run up. Be a bit cool and funky and alternative and position yourself as the street art capital. So they invited a lot of Banksy's friends and street artists overnight or for about a week, and they just painted all these buildings. And this is just one of many. So, you had a really ugly 60s building. Suddenly you go, I don't know what's going on in the guy's head who painted this. There's a lot of alternative people. And it dressed up an area, and it said a lot about the creative culture of this city, where, Aardman Animation, who won Oscars for the talking animals and things, they're based in Bristol. So it was just expressing this sense of place. So little things like that. This is the thing, actually, I took this, sorry, you can't see it, this picture last weekend. It's a little Venel, a close, in a town in Scotland, and they've just allowed somebody to paint these nice pictures. They all say something about the place. So, and of course, you also have it here. I mean, I always try and take pictures of these from the flybus when I come in from the airport, and all I get is raindrops on the window when I manage this one. So, these to me all say something about the spirit of a place. When you live there, maybe you don't notice it, but visitors go, wow. So, just that. Now, I've talked enough for now. We're going to have a buzzing session, which is just breakout groups in your tables. And what I'd like you to do, please, is just have a think about the main challenges you anticipate in pulling a destination audit together. I don't want you to list lots of stuff, But you've seen the customer journey, which I'll put back up. There are also a number on page 27 and 28 of the plan, of the toolkit. There's a list of things. There can be many more. But I don't want you to list more, but I just want you to think, where are we going to have the biggest difficulties in pulling this stuff together? And it might be, we'll look at knowledge gaps later, but where are your three biggest, I'm working threes all the time, the focus is the mind. Where are the biggest areas of challenge you're going to have in pulling a destination audit together? It may be you just don't have information, you're going to need to do surveys. It may be you won't get stakeholders on site to do it. So if you can come up with three things where you think you're going to need to focus most of your effort. Can we have about 15, 20 minutes for that? On working together in your tables. Yeah, no, just what I'd like you to do is write it on the flip charts, actually, please. So
we should
talk together and agree three challenges per table. And I know some of you are going to do 5 because you're not going to be able to restrict yourself to 3. That's fine. But can you please appoint a scribe who will write down the stuff, capture the ideas, and secondly a spokesperson because we'll get you to feed it back. So let's say 3 to 5. The 3 to 5 areas where you're going to find the most challenge doing an audit.
Yeah.